Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet. I'm your host, Mark Cashman. Each week I'll have a special co-host join me from within the Microsoft SharePoint team. And today my co-host is Chris McNulty, Senior Product Manager for SharePoint and Office 365.
Hi, Mark. As always, great to be back. Excited for today's topic, Modernizing SharePoint, which includes moving SharePoint's user base from classic to modern. We talk with Adam Harmetz and DeMaris of the SharePoint engineering team for insight on all that it entails to transform the SharePoint service, from the people building it all the way to the people using it.
Classic is dead like Latin. Like we will fix bugs, but we won't make any improvements to it.
This week we're talking about modernizing SharePoint. We're very excited to have here in the studio with us two members from the SharePoint engineering team, Adam Harmetz, Partner Group Program Manager, and DeMaris, who is a Principal Program Manager. Start off with Adam. Tell us a little bit about what makes Adam Adam. Who are you? Tell us a little bit about your job and here, everything at Microsoft.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here. I've been at Microsoft for 12 years, planning to be here for 1, and now it's 11 more years after that. I've worked on SharePoint my entire career. So I started in the Office organization, working on records management and compliance, and helping SharePoint enter the enterprise content management space. And then for the past couple years, I've been running a team we call SPEX, SharePoint Experience. So it owns basically the front end of SharePoint, as well as a developer platform. So everything from portals and comm sites to classic publishing sites, teams, integration with teams, as well as team sites, our developer platform, like I said, and working with the team in Norway on search and harvesting collective knowledge.
So when anybody says they have an experience in SharePoint or they refer to X or Y that they've seen as a user, primarily it's what you and your team do.
Yeah.
Excellent. So as another guy who's been around for a little bit, Lincoln, you're in this thing called SharePoint and SharePoint for a while. I think maybe even as long as our friend Adam. Tell us a little bit about how you got here, who you are, what you do.
Fun piece of SharePoint trivia. Adam and I actually shared an office at the beginning of our careers.
Excellent.
It was a veritable spec factory in there. So I've been around for 12 years. I enjoy long walks on the beach and helping customers organize their documents. Recently been the program manager on modern lists and libraries, but I've worked on a bunch of other areas: web content management, ECM, OneDrive for Business, team sites, groups. I love it all, and I'm happy to be here today talking about modern UI.
If we stick around towards the end, you'll tell us some secrets of what Adam was like as a roommate?
I will share a bunch of fun facts. Yes, I will.
Great. Now, you both report to Jeff Teper, who's our CVP for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Office.
I've heard of him.
Yep. I think most of the audience has. Now, this year, Jeff has done a 4-part series called Hitting Refresh, with a series of LinkedIn posts about how we've been making a pivot in the product over the past couple of years, what really drove him toward that pivot. And it's largely based on Satya Nadella, our CEO, for those of you who didn't know that as well. His book, Hit Refresh, sort of set the theme up, and Jeff carried it forward into his blog post. Leading up to SharePoint conference come this year, Jeff was writing about, the changes that we've been going through SharePoint since 2015. What he said, lessons for any organization trying to transform how it delivers value to its customer. How do you think we as a team have been hitting refresh?
Yeah, it's definitely worth reading those posts from Jeff on LinkedIn. It sort of takes us back about 3 years ago when we're at a big inflection point for the product.
Right.
Broadly speaking, we had been retrofitting our on-prem product to be cloud ready, and we, there's continue to be work there, but we were at a point where we could sort of take a look at it and say, okay, now that we've had some of those basics of the underlying storage platform done, what can we do in the user experience level to really take it to the next level? And it was of course, about the same time as Satya was becoming CEO. And Satya has this quote, or I think it's a common thing that people say that culture eats strategy for lunch. So while we have a good strategy, it was really about establishing the right culture from the get-go. And Satya talks about many things in terms of culture, growth mindset being one of them. But I think the one that we really internalized most was this notion of empathy, just really sort of getting close to customers, being able to feel the pain and joy that they're going through, fundamentally understand what they're trying to do, and internalize that. And so that was sort of the basics of our journey. We did a bunch of user research. We listened to customers of their cloud journey. And I think one of the things that gives us a ton of empathy is that we talk with customers every day, and some of the transitions they're going through, I relate to. Like, we were an on-prem primarily company. We've made this transition to the cloud. We see, frankly, ourselves, technology has had this huge transformation on our lives, sometimes scary, sometimes awesome. And I think that gives us a lot of empathy, because I know IT shops around the world are going through that same thing. Like this cloud thing happened to all of us, and we all are part of the journey of getting to the end of it. And so I really think that grounds us a lot.
One thing I think it goes without saying, is obvious to us, is that we actually all use SharePoint every day ourselves. And the way that we've been approaching things like news and libraries and so on and so forth, I mean, I think it gives all of us a heads up and understanding, this doesn't work as well as it could. That level of customer empathy really, I think helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
I saw it from a product management perspective before 2015, or roughly that period of time. There was a lot of everything about the job was what isn't possible in the cloud, or what is the gap between on-prem and the cloud. And then as you guys started to turn the crank, not only to modernize the user experience, but also to close that gap, and then transition where now there are things that are only running in the cloud, or things go to the cloud first and down. That inflection point, just from a product management side of it, was I really like to not have to write about the gap anymore. But preferably also that is, I think you really are starting to address, or what are actually people wanting, maybe that we haven't yet done or haven't done in a way that attracts people who haven't been using SharePoint forever.
In the early days of the cloud, everybody was trying to figure out exactly how disruptive it was going to be. Are all the concepts of SharePoint no longer relevant? Is a site an outdated concept? And I think around the same time, coupled with Jeff coming back, coupled with the trend you're talking about, we sort of realized, yes, we will invest intentionally, and sometimes in like new concepts, Teams being an excellent example. But the existing concepts that people have been comfortable with for a while are durable, and they did transition to the cloud well. We have this concept of a site. It needs to be more mobile. It needs to be fast. It needs to have fresh UX. We doubled the size of our design team so we could really execute on a lot of that. But also, I found what really started clicking with customers a few years ago when we said, hey, these long-term investments you've made, this notion of what a site is still relevant. And we're here, we're championing it. And we're saying, yes, it's a great thing. We're bringing it forward, and we're going to bring forward with you, with feedback from you. But we're not going to make you learn completely new things arbitrarily. And I think it created the stability of, okay, now I understand what the cloud is going to make better, and I understand there's like a safety blanket of things that are durable across these changes in generational computing.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to go forward. I think just to transition over to Lincoln, on the same vein, we'll have all the links to everything that Jeff wrote, so if people want to go and dig in there. But one of the things that he hits on is really this aspect of customers. Adam mentioned that. Community and design. And I thought that would be a place where we could start from your perspective when we hit refresh, your perspective on that. What does that mean, and how you shape the service and take it forward into those areas?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. A lot of people ask me, hey, Lincoln, you've been on the SharePoint team for 12 years. Haven't you gotten bored yet? And the answer is, well, no, because my job now is completely different than the job I had when I started. When I started 12 years ago and shared an office with Adam, we built on-premises software, and we shipped once every 3 years, and I think it involved burning bits to a DVD. And it was very waterfall. Entry-level PMs like me, we had our spec list. They shut the door to our office for 12 weeks, and I worked inside of a Word document. Lots of required metadata, by the way. And then you sort of emerged with a final spec. You passed.
By the way, I appreciate that personally.
It's when I fell in love with metadata. It's very wistful for me. You can see it in my eyes right now. But yeah, you finish your specs, you pass it on to engineering in a sort of ceremonial feature funding exercise. Then those features would get built, we'd stabilize, we'd ship a beta, we'd finally ship. And customer input was part of the equation to figuring out what was on the spec list. But we went with our intuition and observations a lot more than we do now. So today I don't have a spec list, I have a backlog. And prioritizing the backlog is chaos, but it's beautiful chaos, because there's so many different inputs that go into deciding what we do in what order. Among them is usage data, conversations with community, things that we hear at conferences, and of course still our own observations about the software landscape. So looking at modern lists and libraries, it's extremely exciting to be as data-driven as we are with that effort. We know every feature and lists and libraries that are being used. We know how they're being used and how much, and we can kind of rank them. So we can see, hey, do we want to improve doc sets, or do we want to improve metadata navigation? We can see, well, which of those is used more.
The community says yes.
Well, the community says both. And so the thing that data allows you to do is work on features that are, according to usage data, most impactful. You work on those first, and that's why you saw us in Modern Lists. We did the whole metadata navigation, porting over to Filters Pane project before we did a lot of other things. And that's great because that moves more people over to the latest and greatest modern experiences. But there's things that you miss when you do it that way. There's a little feature called document sets. So document sets, when you look at the usage data, they're comparatively lesser used. But the thing that raw usage data doesn't tell you is, well, for the people that do use them, it's supremely important to the way they do business. And so we've learned through conversations with the community on our forums and by attending conferences and working closely with customers and various other engagement.
The occasional all caps tweet.
Occasional all caps tweet. Sure, I've gotten a few fun emails in my inbox. Maybe I deserve it. Send them to me, by the way.
Tech community, we appreciate the feedback there too.
Oh, I love passionate threads on tech community. It's my morning coffee. But
Actually, before
anyway,
you walked in, Adam said you were his morning coffee.
Oh, geez.
I don't know if that meant anything.
I'm blushing now.
He just meant that you were full of energy, which we're proving now.
Yeah. Hey, you have to be to manage the listen libraries backlog. But anyway, document sets lesser used. And so some of our fans will note our lack of progress in that area. Well, it's because it's lesser used, but we've learned through engagement how important it is to the customers who are using that feature. And so that caused us to work on it sooner than otherwise we maybe would have, but maybe still too late. And so we're still learning how to prioritize all the different inputs, usage data, conversations, sort of observations from what we see in other consumer and enterprise software, but I think we're getting better and better.
I do think it's important to get that balance between where we are. Now, I wonder how you approach the balance between innovation and being responsive. You know, the Henry Ford quote about if he had just asked customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse.
Yeah.
Right?
Or a document set with a modern homepage, yeah.
Now, that's a horse I'll ride.
Yes. Me too. Well, we'll all be riding it soon.
Sweet.
Anyway, it's definitely more of an art than a science.
You know, one of the things to bring it back to Satya's culture change is as much as possible, we want to try to look at leading indicators, not trailing indicators. We look at all this type of data. But we used to look at the revenue of SharePoint to determine our self-worth, essentially. And that's such a trailing indicator, right? Like if you make a mistake, it'll be years before that would show up in some sort of revenue calculation from finance. But usage data is sort of near real time. And it's not the only thing we look at for sure, but it's such a leading indicator. It can sort of give us this early insight of something we should then go follow up with the community or, you know, to drill in deeper or do a design sprint to go see if it changed.
Yeah, you've got to balance things because people are using the product we have today. And we want to make their lives better today. But at the same time, you have to look 12, 24 months from now and imagine the product at that point. And you want to be smart about how you balance your investments. And that's hard.
We started talking a little bit about design. And I remember shortly after I joined Microsoft 3 years ago, there was a graphic that went out that actually came from our design team. Welcome to beautiful SharePoint. And I wanted to kind of go back to that and really kind of dig into some of the philosophy of why. Like, in going to modern, we've been talking about modern a lot without actually describing what it really is. Like, what have some of the goals that you're proudest of that we've been able to hit?
I'm sure we will share it in the show notes, but this picture of Welcome to Beautiful SharePoint, which was basically an umbrella and a beach, and it sort of invoked this pleasant destination you might actually want to visit. And so that was sort of the number one thing I was trying to get across. Like SharePoint, yes, we handle a bunch of mission-critical scenarios. I hear every day from people who are like, oh, if SharePoint goes down, my work life goes down. But we also wanted it to be someplace you wanted to go to and you would choose. And so that notion of a vacation destination that, of course, you envisioned you'd always want to go to was pretty important. And then the second thing, it was welcome to beautiful SharePoint, not welcome to a beautiful new concept you need to understand that's different than the thing you've invested in for the past 10 years. Also wouldn't fit on the poster. But the whole concept was, the intranet needs a modernization, but it is still valid. Like I was saying, the site is still a concept. And so it was, let's modernize the place people want to go to. Let's think about how you need to be innovative and what you need to add on to it and how you need to keep it relevant, but also not something you're not familiar with. And so those were the two things I think we really were trying to get across with that simple framing.
So if, we've spoken about this a lot in the past couple of years, and I think people who pay close attention are familiar with it. But for our listeners who are less familiar with it, what makes a site or an experience modern?
One big aspect of a modern experience is that it works great on no matter what your screen size is. So desktop scales all the way down to mobile. We're sort of on the whole responsive design bandwagon. That's a big part of what makes it modern. I think Another aspect of modern that's sort of new in the SharePoint world is just sort of a coherent look and feel across everything. Like one thing that's that I get to do now that I didn't get to do when I started is actually work with designers. Back in the day, to draw a user experience, I was working in PowerPoint and I was moving PowerPoint glyphs around. And now we have people who ensure that we have consistent look and feel, branding, colors, font choices, that the product feels like a coherent whole. And that as you're using a SharePoint team site, you're going from the pages to the lists to the libraries to the different experiences within and even across workloads into teams and groups. It feels like a coherent product that sings together. You know, Microsoft has always been criticized for shipping seams in its organization, and you could tell that Team A built this thing and Team B built this thing and Team C built this thing, and it wasn't a coherent whole. I feel like we're a lot better at creating these coherent experiences now.
And that's where I think you guys really listened to the feedback, because I think we started, or I'll say you started, with making it so they were the same files as you went across the different end experiences from Teams, even in Outlook or when you're experiencing Teams, within a team site. Then the feedback came as they want the experience to be the same. When I work with a file, I want it to be the same wherever I am.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that makes modern special is just more of an eye towards consumer software and making it competitive from the perspective of ordinary people who will be using it. Traditionally, we built very functional products that were designed to be appealing to IT. Now we look across the software landscape and we genuinely try to build software that will be appealing, usable, delightful to ordinary people.
And then one of the last important parts of modern, too, is it's extensible. And it's extensible in a modern way, meaning using client-side technology, open source tools in a way that is safe and cloud-born and cloud-ready. And that's an essential part of modern. Classic is also extensible, but now it being sort of cloud-born extensibility is sort of a really important part of how we see the modern experience.
And I think accessibility factors in there, too, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So there's a lot that you guys are doing to the product based on user feedback. We'll get to that in a second. One of the things that we wanted to talk with you guys about, and I think it's maybe start with Adam and then jump to Lincoln, is how have your experiences of working as an engineering team been modernized? We've done a number of acquisitions, bringing those people into the fold. They have different ways of writing code and obviously builds and whatnot to go out. But moving from a product to a service, how has the team adjusted to not only now running a service, but engineering practices that have also been modernized?
Yeah, that is a point of modern we don't like to talk about because it's not necessarily customer facing, but it is a modern tool chain for us, rapid iteration and deployment. We have options we don't always choose, but if, in an emergency, we can update something, immediately worldwide, essentially. And then we have trains that go out at, more predictable schedules. And just being able to hire a new developer from college that's interested in client-side technologies and have them be immediately useful on the SharePoint engineering team has been really useful. This notion that we sometimes use of one Microsoft, in other words, building on the work of others, has really been part of what we mean by modern as well. I worked with the Exchange team very closely on-prem, and it would take 3 years to get one scenario coordinated across in the Exchange and SharePoint product. And it was probably a 40-page manual of how to set up the auth and communication between the two products to be able to do. So everybody had the appetite to do a lot of cross-org scenarios, but the tech was actually decently hard. In the cloud, of course, a lot of that goes away. And, commonly we're relying on Power Apps and Flow for rapid application development and process orchestration strategy. We are a component of Teams. If you'd like to work completely within the Team shell, all of SharePoint will be showing up there, and the list can go on. And so that has been really an important change in how we work. And I think we made engineering investments, and the cloud has naturally gravitate towards those, and Satya helped change the culture. All those sort of came together to have a really different way of working.
So as you've changed your systems, obviously, for how you work, I think to transfer to Lincoln, where I know you spend a lot of time, is now we're collecting a lot of data coming directly from the service. Obviously, we've got a lot of listening posts through different channels to hear what customers like and don't like. What does that mean for how you shift? You talked earlier a little bit about being data-driven or focusing on the voice of the customer and building that into the product. What does that mean from how the team works? Data comes in, and you do what with it?
Yeah, contrasting that against when I started 12 years ago, we sort of planned once every 3 years. Now we're continuously planning. We're continuously learning. Observations are flowing in every day. And the way that we work is structured by having a backlog of things that we want to do and ordering that backlog in terms of what's most impactful and what's most important at the top. And the way we work, instead of assigning an engineer to a feature area once every 3 years, we potentially assign engineers to different areas every month. The other thing that's different, Chris mentioned accessibility earlier. Like it's really been remarkable in the past few years how that's become such an important way of working and designing features. All of our engineers now are screen reader experts. Walking down the halls, you sometimes hear screen readers reading out UI. It's a beautiful thing. And just designing with end users of all types in mind upfront. Design helps us with that, but the buck sort of stops with engineering. So the engineers have adopted that mindset and way of working as well.
Part of our culture is really, especially in the service now, we can sort of feel and experience the pain of our customers more directly. Both, hopefully we don't have too many service outages, but if we do, somebody on our team gets woken up in the middle of the night to go fix it.
There's that old video that has the spikes that come out of the chair whenever an end user doesn't like a feature. Is that how you guys?
I mean, that spike is a needle in your back as your phone rings at 4 a.m. All of our engineers are on call. And so if they build a feature that's not reliable, or if they don't instrument it the right way, or if they don't have the right fault tolerances, they're going to get someone. It's going to break for somebody, and they're going to call support, and that engineer's going to get woken up in the middle of the night. And so, passion for quality right out the gate, I think,
sort of helps develop that empathy.
Yeah. So the drive for quality sleep is really what drives product quality.
Most decisions in life, if you think about it long enough.
At the end of the day, are just humans.
One thing as you were talking, I was thinking back about when SharePoint was a waterfall product and shipping every 3 years. And there was a cadence of there's going to be a SharePoint conference every 2 or 3 years and an MVP interaction, so on and so forth. How have you found interacting with kind of our entire system of customers, partners, and fans? How's that shifted?
The interactions are so much higher quality and valuable than they have been in the past. In the past, you sort of maybe someone like me would see these people once a year, once every 2 years. And now it feels like the conversation lines are always open. And I guess with the pace of change that we're implementing, you're able to talk about new things all the time. And you're always, it's definitely a more high fidelity source of information than it has been in the past.
We take very seriously the amount of change we're injecting on customers. Like I said, we have gone through these changes ourselves. This has been incredibly impactful for our work lives. And so the amount that we sweat the details of change management and change communication, I get a feedback a lot of times how often we sometimes still don't get it right and how much change is too much change, and there's a balance to be had. But I can tell you, I probably spend 4 to 5 hours of my week just talking about how do we roll this out, how do we communicate it, how do we make sure we have continuous delivery but major moments where we're rolling up the story arc. And it's just really this interesting balance that we've had. To go off on a bit of a tangent, I feel like our current org is a merger of two really big orgs and experiences throughout our history. One was Steven Sinofsky running the Office organization. The trains were running on time. This was the on-prem days. They shipped every 3 years. It was command and control. You knew what you were going to do. There was a vision memo. You aligned to the vision memo and you shipped. And then we also bought Yammer, who has this philosophy that, by the time you finish executing on your vision memo, somebody else has already eaten your lunch. And the fact of the matter is, certainly in this new generation of computing in the cloud, like neither extreme is right. And I think we've really worked hard. And I think, back to your original question, part of what I hope customers believe we've had some success over the past years, and part of that success is finding a good merger of those two systems. We have a planning memo. We have a durable vision. People can trust us to know that we have a place we're going, short, medium, and long term, everything from fixing doc sets to executing such that every portal could be a comm site to SharePoint spaces. Like there's that gradient of durability and vision. But we're talking to MVPs every week. I probably get a dozen mails from random people, MVPs being our, premier community members, but also customers on Twitter, anybody that would love to reach out to us. And we have this ability, as Lincoln was saying, to actually respond to their feedback, in product within days if we need to. And so it's this interesting sort of merger between those two extremes and really sort of finding that durable strategy that I think is a pretty solid blueprint for how to build enterprise software in the enterprise. And it also sort of helps our partner community, to Mark, what you were asking, because it provides some durable strategy, but it also shows we're executing quickly. I think customers and partners can sort of figure out how to layer on top of that.
I mean, you certainly both and the team deserve kudos, because the feedback that at least I hear, and I think Chris probably gets the same, is we love the connection with the engineering team. And to your point earlier, that would have been maybe once in 3 years. Point in time. But now you hold weekly or biweekly calls with MVPs, and you ask them for what topics they want to cover. You, of course, have topics you want to push to them.
Tech community, user voice, anybody on Twitter can reach out to us. I get a bunch of DMs or emails based upon all that.
I've even had some very exciting Facebook threads forwarded to me, and they've been super valuable sources of product insight and truth. I'm not even joking right now. All sorts of sources have been super informative in helping us do the right things in the right order.
One thing I found is we have, our entire ecosystem gives us real-time correction just in our communication strategy.
Oh, yeah.
With hey, something in the tech community blog post last week doesn't match the screenshot from 2 weeks ago. And I love that we have customers that are that passionate that they pick up on that level of detail.
I love SharePoint fans. SharePoint fans are the greatest. You guys keep us honest, and you help us do our best work, so thank you.
So, Adam, about 10 years ago, 2008, we really started this journey to the cloud. Business Productivity Online Suite, SharePoint was a part of that. And as it started to transition, like we said, in the last couple of years, really to move to modern, that's 135 million monthly active users of Office 365, a lot of whom are experiencing, using, and giving you the feedback on SharePoint. They're moving from on-premises to online, and a lot of them in hybrid mode. When you think of that journey for the customer, not only is it a modern place that they land in, but how do you think about their journey in the context of the approach of modern? How do you hear from customers and how they're experiencing that journey?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I have some pro tips and strategy, but also go back to what we started this conversation with, is it's really about culture. And I think more than anything, the thing we're committing to is we're going to be a trusted partner as you go through that journey. And we have gone through that journey ourselves. We hopefully have developed empathy over the years of how people, that are going through that journey. And we really, go through it knowing that we need to do a great job at change communication. We do not want to force people to move into something new. We want to earn the right to have people choose the modern experiences in the cloud. And that cultural notion of being a partner together with you on that journey, as opposed to somebody that is just saying, here, you're forced to move here, or, I'm so enthused with the latest trend that's the only thing I'm going to give an option to you. Like, that is this part of our culture, is to really be this empathetic partner as you go through that journey, and we have been through it ourselves. Beyond that, strategy-wise, we are investing in the cloud. Our strategy is that our on-prem release coming later this year is based upon the code and experiences we've had in the cloud. So it is probably the biggest release we've had for SharePoint in about 10 years, because we've had so much new functionality in the cloud that we're able to deliver on-prem. And by the way, more validation of said experience than we've ever had, because it's cloud run code that gets that validation every day. No need to wait for SP1 to install SharePoint 2019, because it'll be a battle-tested product from the get-go. And then, as you mentioned, hybrid is pretty essential. Hybrid is not this transitory state. We treat it from a product perspective as a state customers will be in a long, long time. That means we don't cut corners because, they'll be in hybrid for a month. It's okay. We can punt that. No, we really assume people will be in a hybrid state for a while, whether it's, across their search system, taxonomy, et cetera, et cetera. And then, probably my biggest tip is, don't try to do it all at once. Do stage it. Do think about it. OneDrive ends up being an awesome gateway to the cloud because it tends to be less customization, more shrink wrap, more easy to understand, clear value from the cloud where you have sync across all your devices, regardless of firewalls, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can sort of stage beyond there. And then, customers should make a decision over. Some are viewing the cloud as an awesome chance to really lead with new ways of working, and digital transformation is incredibly important. They want to do it all at once. It's a big bang. And then, lead with Teams. Best of SharePoint is inside Teams. Lead with OneDrive as anywhere access to all your files. And, others are saying, I need to get to the cloud for various good reasons, and I don't want to inject that much change all at once in my users. So I'm going to bring these concepts like a site around. I'm going to migrate all my sites. You don't need to understand something new. Maybe it's a new URL will help you redirect. And then you get the modern experience with sites you understand. And then you can add a team to it later. And it's more of a stage model. And both are completely valid options. I've seen customers do both. My biggest advice is to have a plan. Be intentional about it. Know the culture of your organization and what's going to work and what's imperative for your priorities for IT and for your business users at large.
But in that mode of thinking that Adam was just sharing, you sometimes, I think, in my mind, are the guy to go to about document libraries and have been for a while. For the customer journey, the customer that's been on a classic document library and they're moving into the cloud or maybe in SharePoint Server and getting 2019 with the classic the new modern experience, how would you explain that journey and how would you help a customer along in a context of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about being on-premises with classic document libraries and moving to the cloud with modern team sites and modern document libraries, everything Adam said was true. The goal is to stay productive. And so if you have important customizations in classic on-prem, many of those you can move to the cloud and you can sort of not put your put your users through change at that point. So migrate them to the cloud, keep them on what they're used to, and keep them productive day to day. We give you a ton of flexibility. You can choose to use modern or classic at the tenant, site, web, or individual level. So we let you really fine-tune your environment. But my advice is you should bias your thinking towards imagining the move to the cloud as a chance to start fresh. And the cool thing about starting fresh with modern is that you get to be on the platform that all of our new investments are going to be in. So you'll get Flow, you'll get Power Apps, you'll get responsive UI. Everything that we're doing to make document libraries and lists better, we're going to be doing it on modern. So you should, it's a balance between keeping people in what's familiar, keeping them productive, and putting them through a little bit of change in the interest of imagining yourself 2 to 4 years from now. You don't want to be left behind as we go and we make modern experiences better and better and better.
So if Jeff is hitting refresh based on Satya, who has hit refresh, you're also encouraging customers to consider it a move to modern as if they're hitting refresh as well.
That is a great tie together. Yes, it's absolutely a balance, but I think moving to the cloud is a chance to re-envision how you view customizations and productivity. A lot of people kind of have a love-hate relationship with their on-premises, highly customized to the teeth, expensive, super bespoke environments. And so it's a chance to kind of take a deep look at that and figure out which of them are really adding value and which of them maybe can be jettisoned in the interest of getting on the modern train.
So one thing I wanted to get everyone's take on is there are many customers who are sort of halfway. Some of their sites are in classic, some are in modern. How would you guide them as to the way to approach that transition?
Well, first of all, I'll say that we have absolutely no plans to remove classic. Classic is going to be a part of our product mix for some time, for the foreseeable future, in fact. But we hear a lot of feedback that from the end user perspective, it's confusing to have to go back and forth between classic and modern. And so the risk is not Microsoft yanking classic away from people. The risk is alienating your users by making them work in one place for part of their day job and work in another place for the other part of their job. And so the advice that I would give is really identify the select few environments that should be classic because of an essential customization in a master page that you can't move to the SharePoint framework right away, or because of some really essential custom action that you can't port to SharePoint framework. But try to bias towards moving people over to modern. And hey, if that sounds too expensive, or if that's something you just don't want to do or think about for the next couple years, don't worry, we've got your back. Classic is here for the foreseeable future.
But also fair to say that modern will also remain the center of innovation for us.
Oh, yes. Yeah, classic is dead like Latin. Like we will fix bugs, but we won't make any improvements to it.
So, guys, thank you very much for coming in. Certainly, we hope you stay around for the FAQs.
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing everything about how you are all thinking of classic to modern, what you're doing for our customers, your work with partners, certainly the work that you do that give Chris and I a job to share what you're doing every week, month, year. But thank you for coming into the studio. Thanks for your time.
Cool. Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. It was a blast. Thanks.
So now it's time for our Articles of the Week section. Mark, what are some things our listeners should pay attention to?
We have a lot of articles that we're going to reference, and one of them is obviously the links to all that we base the show on, the Hitting Refresh series that Jeff put into LinkedIn. There's a lot of resources when you're thinking about moving to modern. Certainly, there's everything we talked about today was based on Hitting Refresh by Jeff Teper, that's based on the book by Satya Nadella, Hit Refresh. And Jeff posted 4 parts out there on LinkedIn. Part 1 really focuses on the history of Microsoft and how SharePoint plays into the cloud. Part 2 is really the history of Jeff, if you want to learn more about Jeff. And he's got a great line that Satya sent him, a 1-line email saying, "SharePoint needs you back. Come by tomorrow." That'd be a great email to get from Satya. Part 3 really gets into the meat of what we're doing to modernize across the board, starting with customer interactions, community, setting the vision, and a lot of working as one Microsoft. And then Part 4, he kind of saved that to publish after the SharePoint conference. But really on the day of the SharePoint conference, Part 4 got published, and it really was putting all of our announcements in the context of the notion of hitting refresh.
Now, the catch is, if you refresh yourself by going through all of them, there's an Easter egg in it for you, isn't there?
There is a really nice Easter egg that mentions basically it's the first time that Jeff and Satya worked together on a cast called the Dev Cast, and it's quite lengthy, but very worth it if you want to see Jeff as a younger boy, younger man, and Satya certainly a lot younger, on a great Dev Cast, doing a great job. We'll put some links in the show notes if you want to see them working together a long, long time ago, especially if you jump to the part where Satya for the first time really is publicly talking in his role.
It's also great if you ever want to tell your grandkids what early 90s computer graphic intros looked like on TV shows.
It's just an awesome video, especially if you have any sense of who Jeff and Satya are. It's really classic to see them in their early days. 2 other articles just worth mentioning are Modernizing Your Classic SharePoint Sites. We'll put a link in the show notes. It really walks through all of the things that are possible in terms of using either modern experiences or leveraging and using as a platform to build modern experiences from a custom perspective. The last one was a relatively new announcement that fits into how we can help our ISV level developers, but it really is applicable to anybody that's thinking about building custom in SharePoint Online as a part of Office 365. It's called the SharePoint Starter Kit. And it really gives a lot of sample code, some example web parts, and really design layouts of what you can do built on top of communication sites to carry forward the ability to customize your environment for whatever it is you need. So look for those articles in the show notes. And if you have interest in how to move your custom experiences or custom development experiences from classic to modern, there's a lot of great resources. So we've reached that point in the show where we talk about FAQs, frequently asked questions. And Adam, we'll start with you. We really are interested. You get a lot of questions probably. What's the most frequently thing that you get asked? And the most important thing is, what's your answer?
Sure. Recently been asked, what's up with search? Because we made some announcements at the SharePoint Conference North America. And people are just interested in what's new for harvesting collective knowledge and discovering content. And so, I think we announced a couple things. One was that we are closing the gap from the classic enterprise search center into the modern experiences in Office.com and SharePoint Home and search embedded in sites. The biggest one was probably the ability to extend the search result page with UX customizations. So we're being very clear that, we have the go forward, typical classic to modern playbook that we've played in other areas of the product. And then secondly, it's one of the ones that doesn't change the UX, but it's incredibly important, is that we have basically a personalized search ranker now. So we use the signals from who you're emailing and who you're exchanging documents with to boost the content from those around you higher in search results. Because not all the time, but a lot of the time you're searching for things that you or people around you might have looked at before. So this is just 2 quick examples of the latest innovations in search, which we continue to make.
And that logic you're using across the product, not just in SharePoint. That logic of who you work with, what you work on, plays into search experiences and search experiences beyond SharePoint.
Absolutely. It's all the same graph-powered intelligence, we call it around the office, that personalizes the experience, whether it be search or Office Docs or your intranet.
Great question.
Lincoln, what's a question you've been hearing a lot lately?
One thing I get asked all the time is, hey, Lincoln, when are you going to get rid of classic mode SharePoint lists and libraries? When is that going to be something I can't rely on anymore? Let me just answer that very simply. We have no plans to remove classic mode lists and libraries. It's not something we think about at all. It may never happen. So you should be able to count on, if you need classic lists and libraries, some feature in there, some customization point, if some part of your environment hinges on that, that's going to be something you can rely on for the foreseeable future, maybe forever. That said, you should balance that with the desire to move to modern. We want to inspire everybody to move to modern. We want it to be something that you choose because it's the platform for all of our future investments. And frankly, your end users are probably going to be better off. People don't like going back and forth between classic and modern, something we hear very often. But for mission critical things, you have nothing to fear. Classic is here to stay.
I think that's a great message, and I think it's something that if I can say Lincoln says and reiterate that when people ask that question, I think
Absolutely.
It's a phenomenal answer and a really great strategy, not only for what you're doing, but to really think if you're really listening to customers, that's truly what they're hoping your answer is, and it's great that that's the answer.
Good.
One question I've heard a lot, the question is always, I want to start using modern pages and customizing them, but we're also starting to roll out Teams. Is there a way for me to marry the two together? And the answer is, of course there is. Teams now has a capability where you can add a link as a tab in any channel inside of Teams. And if you're pointing that to SharePoint, we've introduced capabilities in modern pages that allow that page to render nicely in there, integrate closely into the navigation, so you can simultaneously deploy those customizations into SharePoint as well as into Teams.
Yeah, and actually to expand upon that, one of the things we announced at the SharePoint conference is that we'll go even further than page integration. Like SharePoint at the end of the day, it's three things. It's libraries, pages, and lists.
Yep.
So those three core concepts of SharePoint will be fully integrated into Microsoft Teams by the end of this year. And so, if you'd like to work completely within the Teams shell, it's like a no-compromise solution. It's actually like a mini copy of the SharePoint front end, calling the same APIs that our browser UX does, such that you'll have the full functionality. And when we ship new things, they'll ship the same day in a Teams tab as they would in your intranet web browser as they would elsewhere as well.
And that is an awesome experience as you go across the suite. Again, back to what we mentioned a little bit earlier in the show of common experiences. Common experiences. Get the user used to something that they like. Once we start to get actually what they like, to have that be when they experience it in Teams, in Outlook, whether it's a list or a library, whether it's a page.
Pains me when somebody says, I want to use Teams, but I can't pin a folder to the top of my document library. I'm like, that is really our fault. We created that problem, but we have the good, durable solutions such that we'll take those terrible choices off the table.
That's great. Well, My FAQ this week actually stems from some information that we shared at the SharePoint conference, where we started to peel back the onion a little bit about what is this thing, SharePoint Server 2019. And off the heels, of course, there's a lot that the team, you all are investing in and carrying from online down to on-premises. But in my work, a lot of people are asking, what are the things that you do for sites, communication sites, team sites? What are those things? How do they play into SharePoint Server 2019? And the great answer in terms of how you're building that and passing that down is you will have modern sites in SharePoint Server 2019. You will have communication sites in SharePoint Server 2019. And all the beauty that comes with that is modern pages, news, lists and libraries, of course.
I was going to say, we
get modernized by default,
They're there.
And the web parts. So think about a lot of the new things that we've shipped as far as building pages, working with your files, sharing, all that stuff gets modernized in the container of modern team sites and modern communication sites that have always been modern. Again, thank you for your time today. Thanks for your questions. And of course, as the audience has always been telling us, thanks for your answers.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's great to be able to communicate with so many folks here through the podcast, but it's also great for us to get outside of Redmond and engage with our community at events coming up around the world. Probably one of the best places to find us is any of the SharePoint Saturdays going on, and there's dozens and dozens throughout the world. In July, there's ones in Dakar, Bangalore, New York City. And if you go to spsevents.org, you can usually find where the latest and greatest is going to be coming near you. Also, coming up in middle of July, especially focused on our partners, Inspire, which is 20,000 people converging on Las Vegas. The SharePoint team will be there in force with information about content services, business applications, intranets, teamwork, Lions, tigers, bears.
Oh, my.
Exactly.
So jump to then August. There's 2 great conferences, one in Seattle, SharePoint Fest, and one in Boston, the SharePoint TechCon. And those are all great conferences for a lot of the same reasons, but very regionally focused and give you a lot of great content from great speakers. We'll put the links in the show notes to go and register for those, but those are both at the end of August. So if you're on the East Coast, think of SharePoint TechCon Boston. And if you're on the West Coast, think SP Fest Seattle.
And I'm sure we'll be doing something in the Podcast Center at Ignite in late September in Orlando. It is the place for everything under the Microsoft umbrella for implementation and for IT.
So there is no shortage of SharePoint content, both at a keynote level, overview sessions, breakout sessions, workshops. Very tactically, both Microsoft and MVPs will be presenting. There still is going to be a SharePint.
There's Share Yoga.
Share Yoga is also wonderful.
Yep.
And of course, there's a lot of the inclusive and diversity type sessions that have been really optimized, I think, at the SharePoint conference and carry forward into some of these other bigger conferences.
Yep.
So then, just to round out, at the end of the year, there is an Office and SharePoint live event. It's a third-party event in Orlando, December 2nd through the 7th. And this is put on by our partner, the Live 360 Events. We'll put a link in the show notes so you can go and register. Basically, it's 3 full days of workshops and breakout sessions. And the really cool thing about this event is it's not only a SharePoint and Office 365 live event, but it's also co-located with a number of other events that are going on that once you pay for the ticket of admission, you can necessarily gravitate to go to SQL Server or Tech Mentor or AI Live. So it's a great event at the end of the year to wrap up to really get anything that you need from SharePoint and beyond.
Thank you to our guests, Adam Harmetz and Lincoln DeMaris from the SharePoint engineering team.
We encourage you to send in your comments and questions for the SharePoint team and guests of the show. Send an email or voice memo to theintrozone@microsoft.com or post a tweet to @SharePoint.
Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your friendly local podcast.
Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Mark Cashman, here with Chris McNulty, and this has been The Intrazone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet.